everybody. Jason from @scoon.art here, and welcome to another edition of Indie Comics Corner. So I'm back from the Athens Book Fair that I was at last weekend. It was a lot of fun. I printed a whole bunch of Alf comics and figure drawing zines that you can see right over here. Let me grab those for you. Screen printed a whole bunch of covers and assembled them, and then printed a bunch of these figure drawing zines, designed them, printed them, trimmed them, only to leave them at home and not realize it until I started assembling my table at once I got to Athens. But I mean, not all was lost. I didn't get to sell any of these zines and put them in anybody's hands, but I was able to pivot and figure out something that might work with the help of some of my table neighbors. And come over to the drawing table. I'm working on a little study here. So let's get some work done and I'll tell you all about it. All right, so the Athens Book Fair, the worst possible thing I could have done, and it seemed like an absolute disaster at the time. I spent an entire week reprinting those Alf zines, the Alf Online comic that I made about a year ago. And, I screen printed the cover, so it's a little labor intensive. Printed them out and assembled them. That was kind of the easier part. And I designed a figure study zine because I love to do figure drawing, and I have a good wealth of figure drawing studies that I've scanned and archived on my computer that I've done. And I keep hard copies of them, usually just kind of in my closet or something. I mean, they're not super presentable for like a gallery show or anything, but that's not to say that they're useless or anything. You learn a lot when you put in that type of practice and kind of create a space for yourself to, connect with, observational drawing. I think even if it's not figure studies, is very powerful in that way. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. I designed and printed it and, assembled it and trimmed it only to drive all the way to Athens, which is about 2.5 hours away from where I live, and realize I left them all at home. So what do I do? Well, the first thing I did was panic. I'll be honest with you. I started unpacking my books, and I said to myself, wait a second, where the heck are these zines? And that's when it hit me. And the what do you call it? The kind of disastrous thinking, steps in. I think it's just kind of an automatic trigger response for most people. Especially if you put in a lot of work on something and then you just one little mistake just kind of undoes it. It does feel very devastating. But I was already there. I was as I was kind of panicking, I was like, well, what can I do? I can't text my wife and have her drive all the way out here with the kids. That would be insane, and it would, already the show would have already started. So it's like, well, I can't do that. Like, obviously you can't FedEx or overnight them or something. I literally was just going to be like, all right, you don't have the books. Just gonna have to accept that. What do you have? And that's what got me to the next thing. Well, what do I have that I can do today, that I can pivot to right now? And I was looking at my table and I said, well, instead of a newsletter, I usually have a little notebook out there, and I just, write newsletter in bubble letters at the top of a blank page and number it like 1 to 10. And usually I can pick up some voluntary signups for my newsletter, although I will say there's not a lot of results on that end. I think I'm still kind of learning the art of writing a newsletter and figuring out that aspect of marketing. So far I'm not very successful at that. So it just made sense to kind of sacrifice that table space in favor of something else. And what I came up with is, I do love observational drawing, and there's a technique that you learn, in like figure drawing, or even like probably even like drawing one or something, called blind contour drawing. And what that is, you do your best to keep your eye on your subject, whether you're drawing a person or, a building, whatever the subject may be, and you want your eye to follow the outlines of what separates that person from the background, and allow your eye to follow those outlines, not just on the silhouette or perimeter of them, but observe how these lines dip and dive within the subject. If it's a body in particular, or a face, there's a lot of opportunity for, somebody's like outline, for lack of a better word, especially where muscles happen, or if there's, no body is a straight line. It's constant ripples and like wrinkles. There's never ending supply of lines, when it comes to the human body, and no two of them are parallel, no two of them are straight. That's why I find figure drawing to be so fun and interesting. But you follow those lines with your eye, and you try to get your pen to match how your eye is going around the subject. So without looking at your pen and looking at your subject only. So for instance, I went to the Elmwood Cemetery yesterday to do a little bit of research for a commission that I'm doing. And I just took some pictures. So for instance, if I'm drawing this same, more rendered, statue here, gravestone, like what I would do is like, okay, I'm just going to pick a point to start. Don't look at your paper. Allow your eye to go. And you can do this from a picture. You can do this from life. It's a very valuable practice, but allow your eye to follow the line down. Try not to look at your paper. If you peek, that's okay. Sometimes you need to reorient yourself. So none of these rules are like hardwired in, but it's more of an objective, like an endurance contest, to be like, okay, see how long you can do this without peeking, type thing. And you just follow it along. Let your eye wander, but try to maintain it on a track of like, whatever line you were following is like the railroad track of your drawing here. All right, so I've kind of hit a dead end there, so I'm just going to reorient myself right here. And we got I think this is the back of a cloak or something going down. That dips down in there, and that comes back out to the shoulder. And if you work fast, you're going to make quicker decisions. But the important thing is keeping your eye on that ball, on that line, on wherever it travels. You want your pen to try to mimic where your eye goes. And what this does, it builds a very confident line, because you're not looking at what you're drawing. You're not overly judging the marks you're making. And you can see just like from here to here, it gets a little bit wonky. I'm going to reorient right here, back up at this little circle crest here, and we'll start again. What this does, like I said, it builds confidence in line, because you're not looking at what you're doing, therefore you're not judging what you're doing, and you're just blindly allowing your hand to do its best to follow what you are looking at. This teaches drawing is basically seeing, what you're looking at. Pay attention to what these lines are doing, what the details are, what makes the drawing, dynamic and interesting. And by the end of it, you often end up with a very wonky, out of proportion drawing, but it's ultimately a very interesting drawing. And you can notice areas where, oh my God, yeah, I really was looking at that. Look at how this lines up. You can pick out these little details of what you were looking at, and it reinforces on a subconscious level this hand-eye coordination. If you ever played like baseball or softball or any sort of sport, keep your eye on the ball. It's the same principle, hand-eye coordination. And then we're going to come down, and I'm going to choose to follow these lines as they zip down, because I believe they'll take me back up. And it's okay to work fast. again, the idea is you want to when you're drawing, it's I see it as obviously like it's looking, but you're also training yourself how to react. Like it's a muscle memory thing, you know. It's the same reason people that get like concealed carry guns and stuff like that. Well, if you're serious about it, you will train. You want to have maybe this is a bad example because I'm sure it's very polarized, but it's the same with anything. Like you see, a guy that anybody in the NBA, if they're shooting 3-pointers, it's like they're doing it in their sleep because they have this hand-eye coordination that came from practice and repetition. And this is a good way to do it with drawing. So I'm gonna reorient myself again here. Let's see here. We got this one coming down. I'm gonna try not to mess with the study I'm doing here, the more rendered study. But anyway, you get the point. Notice how different these two things are and the things that I'm looking at, but you can see the similarities. You have the hand here, this coming down, this hand here. And it also teaches you to kind of divorce what the subject actually is, because, you might have seen a gravestone, you might have seen this particular icon that's on the gravestone before, but you want to draw what you see, not what you think you see. Your mind is already filled with signs and signifiers of, say you're drawing a chair, of like what a chair is, but the angle that you're looking at the chair isn't necessarily, what your mind's eye thinks a chair is. So that's blind contour drawing. And so what I did is I made a little sign offering blind contour portraits. Yeah, I had my table neighbor Gwen pose for me. Not long, about 5 minutes. She was very gracious to do so, and I just did a quick blind contour portrait in my sketchbook with my pen, which I always make sure I have with me just about everywhere I go. So that's like one of those, muscle memory things. If I'm going somewhere, sketchbook, pen, even if I don't use it, it's good to have it type thing. And I made a quick sign and slapped it on my table where my newsletter notebook would have gone. And just kind of hoped for the best. At that point, I said, well, just like in drawing, I reacted to the situation in a thoughtful way, like, not in a lashing out kind of way. Although I will admit there was that moment of, panic thinking where I'm like, oh no, this is going to be an absolute disaster. I'm not going to sell anything, blah, 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 blah. And guess what? It turned out to not be true. I got a couple of people that wanted a blind contour portrait, so I made $30. I charged $15 a piece for them. And it was a great opportunity to talk to people about drawing, and they go home with a unique portrait. It's not like a caricature, which I'll admit, it's not something I've practiced a whole bunch, so I'm not particularly good at caricature drawing. But blind contour is a fun little, I almost consider it a parlor trick as much as it is a fundamental drawing exercise, because you're doing this thing where it's like, I'm going to draw you without looking. It's very carnival barky, it's very salesman-y, it's very easy to sell, especially if there's something you make part of your practice and do regularly, and you really build that connection between your brain and your eye, and it not only improves your drawing skill and confidence in your line, but it also it's another tool in your repertoire. Now I don't know if I'd be able to do something like that at like an anime convention or something. Again, this was a small press book fair that was like very much catering to like the local artsy population of Athens, of which there are quite a few. A lot of cartoonists and like bookmakers and printmakers and like incredibly talented artists that like not only tabled at the book fair, but like were people coming to check it all out. I mean, it was I had such a pleasure getting to know my table neighbors around me, all of whom I bought something from, which let me show those off real quick. Shout out to my table neighbors in Athens. I thought this was really cool. This guy reassembles action figures and makes these cool like backing things for him. So I grabbed one of those from him. That's all his info there at FEOND_base. Actionverse, Beyond Wars, fantasy figures. So it's like very retro, but also very like, DIY. I love it. I don't know what I was gonna do with this, but I saw this and I was like, I could do something with it. It'll look cool on my wall at least. And I had seen this book be posted about on my Instagram, and I was like, oh my god, folk horror in the United States, Crossroads, the long decade. And it's just about like Southern folklore. It says Texas Chainsaw Massacre, folklore and legends. Race with the Devil, Harvest Home, Deliverance, American Witchcraft, Ganja and Hess, Season of the Witch, The Satanic Panic. All of these things are something I am very into, and it looks like, it's kind of a series of essays maybe, or short stories. But this is the first issue of the Crossroads Folk Horror in the United States. A zine examines how the folk horror genre expresses itself in the United States. So it's very much an exploration of like history and fiction and the intertwiningness of those things. I'm very looking forward to diving deep in this thing. And I love the spot illustrations that are in here. I met the editor who was tabling a couple of tables down from me, Candace Bailey. So if you can, give them a follow, crossroads.folkhorror on Instagram. And it looks like they got a Substack at Crossroads Folk Horror Zine. So check them out. This is a quality book that, I don't know, from where I am in the South, like definitely like piqued my interest. I love haunted stuff. I like the history of stuff like that. And then I got these from my table neighbor, Gwen. Just a couple of zines here. Rotting. She's a very, very accomplished artist. I mean, like, these illustrations are absolutely beautiful. Ink washes. And she's an incredibly nice person. She works with, Anthony... I forget his last name, but they got a printing company where they do a lot of, like, Riso stuff. And then I got to talking to her about screen printing, and bought this zine from her that she completely screen printed. Do you know when you're driving? Look at this. This is awesome. This is so unique. I don't have anything like this in my collection. And, wow, I was incredibly honored to be able to sit next to her, and she was so incredibly gracious to help me out and pose for me for 5 minutes. I gave her the sign after the fest. This is so... I'm going to have to reverse engineer this. This is so cool. I recently learned that not everyone experiences streaky lights at night. Who knew? Very, very cool. Give her a follow. Gem Clip Comics. GEMCLIPCOMIX. And I'll have to put Anthony's name on here too, because he actually did a little... Anytime I can try to convince somebody to draw with a fountain pen, I will. And I did so with Anthony. I just want everybody to join my fountain pen cult. Every artist I meet, oh yeah, you don't like fountain pens? Well, you just might not have found the right one. And he did this little pizza guy and cactus cowboy guy for me. Anyway, so that was pretty much my move, and I think it ended up being a success. I still have all these like Alf zines that I printed and figure drawing zines, but the Athens Book Fair is not the only thing I'm tabling at this summer. I have another one coming up on July 11th in Hickory, North Carolina, the Time Tunnel Comic-Con, put on by a local comic shop, Time Tunnel Comics, and I'm really looking forward to that. I went and checked it out last year, and it seemed like a really nice, just small local comic fest. There was a good turnout. I was able to talk to one of the artists there, which I have his books in my bedroom. I'll have to feature him on a little comic review when I do another one of those. He might be next. So yeah, I'm going to be prepping for that next week. I got to screen print more shirts. Those sold really well at the Anime Fest. I got some Alf shirts that I got to do, some, just Megazone, Gohan, and this time I'm going to try to stock mediums because I had a lot of requests for mediums at the Anime Fest. So, just taking what I've learned from these things. I've never done an actual like comic centric con before. If this is a small local one, it's still, I've done small press fairs, I've done zine fests, I've done anime conventions several times, even, again, small stuff, local stuff. Connect with your community. Let the people that are near you know that you're here and you're making stuff. I know Kevin Costner's a little cheesy and whatever, but it is kind of a if you build it, they will come. But you also have to like grease the wheels a little bit. You got to put it in their hands and stuff. Let them know you're there. So yeah, I guess the lesson for that is like, there's definitely disasters that are going to happen when you prep for these things, especially because it's very, if you're working by yourself, it's very easy to get a little tunnel vision or overwork yourself. Like, for instance, the Friday before when I thought I was all done prepping and packing, I've skipped lunch kind of by accident. I didn't realize it was so late in the day before I was hungry and it was close enough to dinner time. And we, it was Friday night, so we ordered some sandwiches actually, and I foolishly, my mind was my belly was just so hungry. I foolishly got the full size Jersey Mike's turkey and provolone and just housed the whole thing, and went and laid down on my heating pad to kind of rest my back because I'm getting old. It's sitting in one position or just having bad posture and, not getting enough actual physical activity that day kind of took its toll on me. So I was like, all right, I'll lay down on my heating pad for a little bit. And I ended up falling asleep on it and, didn't wake up till like 1 a.m. and brushed my teeth and fell back asleep. And I'll be honest with you, I'm amazed that the new zines were the only thing I forgot. So these things happen, especially when you're working for yourself. It's very easy to get overstretched, forget things, get a little scatterbrain. But you also, it's not helpful, obviously have your moment of panic. You're allowed to be like, oh, this is a disaster, but you need to, at some point, you have to just kind of accept it. Be like, well, I'm 2.5 hours away from home. The books are not going to get here. It's done. What's done is done. What can I do now to pivot? And even if you try something and it doesn't work, there's a nobleness in trying. We're creatives, we're artists. We're supposed to be able to, obviously, like, it's ideal, I guess, to have absolute freedom as an artist. But I think creativity thrives in these moments where you're kind of put in a little bit of a box, a little bit. And how you react to it, it's not something, it's something that you learn, it's you just got to go through the fire a little bit and forget all your zines at home at the small press book fair. And you know what? You might find that it's not as big of a disaster as you thought. Sure, maybe if I had them and I did I could frame it as like, oh, well, if I had them and I did the blind contour sketches, I could have made more money. But, you don't want to think about it that way, because then, number one, you're getting too much focused on the return on this, which, obviously you don't want to be blowing all your money and making no sales and stuff like that. If face it, we're artists, but you have to also be a merchant. Japanese printmakers had a very interesting philosophy about this whole thing, and they saw themselves as equal parts artist, equal part merchant. And I think in this day and age, looking to something like that happened, over 200 years ago, like a tradition, like the Edo period in Japan. How to create art that can be easily reproduced and sold, and bringing it to the masses too. Like, the art in Europe, specifically was, if you were commissioned by like a family like the Medicis, or you were for the king in England, or for a noble house, you got to create these tapestries, create these paintings, and they often wanted a certain thing in a certain style, which is great. Like, I love like your Caravaggios, and I'm not too much into the tapestries, I guess, so I can't name drop any of that stuff. But I like that, but I think there's also like, you look at an outlier of art history at the time, like Vincent van Gogh. He was a failed artist in his lifetime, and it wasn't until after he died that people became appreciative of him. But he took a lot of inspiration from those Japanese prints. So there's not only an idea of like bringing these things to the masses, but the Japanese prints traveled so far into Europe that Vincent van Gogh got his hands on them, and he was able to create art that is now like seen as like massively influential in the post-impressionist. I think he's post-impressionist. Somebody correct me in the comments. I'm not. I like art history, but I'm fast and loose with the facts, so I apologize to anybody who actually does know their stuff. But I'm open to correction, so please clear this up. And if I'm saying anything wrong, I also don't write a script. I'm shooting from the hip, so enough defending myself. But he was able to create his own art because he got, he would famously spend all of his money on like Japanese prints. If you look at like his wheat fields, like there's a flatness to his work that is akin to those Japanese prints, but it's still very much his own thing. He's working in a different medium, oil paints. His work is a lot about like, the thickness of the paint, the texture of the paint, rather than the subject matter. But it does come together in one gestalt to create like, what everybody knows and loves about Van Gogh's paintings today. Why everybody likes to go see the Starry Night or the cafe or the haystacks. I love his haystacks. The workers in the field. I mean, there's a lot of parallels you can draw between stuff like that. But so yeah, long story short, it's okay if you mess up. It's okay to have that moment of disaster, but you also have to have that moment of acceptance where, well, this is the situation I'm in now. What are the resources I have available to me? Obviously look at your own toolbox, but, make friends with people around you. Be friendly to them. Ask questions. Be interested in what they're doing. One of the things that I'm constantly amazed at is, like, how the amount of, like, talent and knowledge that is out there, and how willing people are to help you out if you're just, show an interest in what they're doing, ask questions, all that fun stuff. You got to be social. It's a give and take, So, there you have it. I made possibly one of the biggest mistakes you can make as a zine maker or comic book maker, or, just if you table anywhere at a market. You forgot a whole bunch of stock that you spent a week making specifically for the event. So, that you just got to push forward, and it's just one of those lessons you learn when you're tabling early on and doing small press stuff and trying to get your name out there. You got to wear a lot of hats if you're an artist trying to get your work in people's hands. You got to be marketer, you got to be posting on the internet, you got to be beating the street, you got to be submitting stuff to any publication that'll take your work, like Inks Comics, for example. But these things happen, we're human. We're going to drop the ball sometime. And the important thing is to just like, have your moment of self-pity or whatever. It's a human thing to do, especially if you put in all that work prepping for something only to just have your legs kind of swept under you, even if it's by your own, whatever. But yeah, I hope you've found whatever I've said here encouraging from an anecdotal perspective. I can only offer these anecdotal stories as I do them. And I guess in the future what I'll do is I need to a week out from these events, maybe make a list of these things that I need to bring so that way I can check them off. I think my biggest mistake, though, was eating that sandwich and falling asleep, not taking care of myself. I should have took some time out for lunch, maybe had a smaller sandwich for dinner, and I wouldn't have been lulled into a food coma. Pack my stuff the night before. That's usually what works for me. Make a list, pack my stuff the night before. But hey, we're human. We make mistakes, and we're going to push forward to the next convention, July 11th, Hickory, North Carolina, the Time Tunnel Comic Con. So if you are in or around Hickory and you like comics, come on out. There's going to be tons of vendors there. Last time I was there, I got a really neat Alf, like iron-on patch that I got on my, my winter jacket. Yeah, and I picked up some really great books from a local creator there. And I'm going to be there with my shirts, my comics, my zines, and I don't know, maybe I'll offer commissions. I don't know. I didn't see too many people in like cosplay there or anything like that, but I might leave a sign open for a commission. Use my little chalkboard sign there. But till next time, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.